Good morning, this is Paul Chek. Welcome back to my video blog. Today I thought I'd take a little different approach to my blog and share a process that I go through. There's been a number of you that have written in on my blog asking me for specific methods of meditation or how I meditate. I use a number of different methods, but today I'm going to share one with you that is what I would call the easiest hard thing and the hardest easy thing you'll ever do. So the danger of having me teach you the things that I do is I have a tendency to go wrestle with the dragons, and I think that if you practice what I'm going to share with you, you'll find it's very, very powerful, but you'll also get to giggle at yourself for how often you know that you have the tools to change your inner state, enhance your relationships, enhance your relationship with yourself, but don't do it, which is called conditioning. For those of you that aren't familiar with the term conditioning as it's used in psychology, I imagine most of you are familiar with Pavlov's dog. So if conditioning isn't a concept that you're familiar with, just go on the internet and look up Pavlov's dog and you'll get a very quick description of what conditioning is. And I have a cartoon in one of my slideshows, and it shows Pavlov's dog laying on a couch in the psychiatrist's office. And the psychiatrist says, "How can I help you?" He says, "I'm so goddamn pissed off at myself because I was salivating when he rang the bell and there was no food there." So the dog felt tricked, but really, we trick ourselves more times than not. So I'm going to talk to you today about a concept that I painted to give me a symbolic reminder of what my daily spiritual practice is. And this is a method that allows you to take the concept of meditation everywhere you go, and you can actually use meditation in real time, in real situations, which I think is very, very valuable, because many of us are under the idea that we have to sit in a specific spot or do a specific thing or carve time out of our day to have this meditative spiritual practice. And I've watched as many become extremely stressed trying to force that to happen in their life, which is certainly laudable, it's commendable. But we run the risk of putting so much stress on ourselves to try to have a spiritual practice that the wind-up we get causes emotions and entanglements and relationships and frustrations. So by the time we get to meditate, we really can't meditate very well because we're still frustrated and wound up. My mother meditated most of my childhood from 12 on, and even working extremely hard, oftentimes coming home at 2 o'clock in the morning, was so disciplined she'd meditate for an hour a day, which she did for a good 24 years straight before she began exploring other processes. And I was always very observant of my mother's discipline, and it really showed me that a woman living under very challenging situations, financial stress, family stress, every kind of stress you can imagine a mother can have, she was juggling it all. And she taught me that you can take responsibility for your own life, and you can take responsibility for your circumstances, and you can take responsibility for creating a space inside of yourself for a relationship with Great Spirit, or that which is still and nourishing. So what I did is I painted this painting that came to me as a vision. I asked my soul, what do I want to paint today? And this is what came. So I'm going to show it to you up close so you can see it, and then I'm going to use it as a basis for explaining a meditative practice. So instead of drawing on the board like I often do, I will point to the painting. So this is the technique I call gapping the snakes. And you can see this is a symbolic representation of me reaching the state of samadhi, which I've enjoyed a number of times. And it's a very, very powerful experience that one could say is, mind-boggling, because there is no mind there. You're in an ineffable state that can't be described, so I won't even try, but the closest I could say is you become one with all that is, and paradoxically, there's nothing there at the same time. But it's a state in which what I would refer to as unconditional love becomes manifest as an experience in which everything flows through you. The two snakes that you see there, the black one represents yin, the white one represents yang, and the symbolic representation of myself, which could also, it also a representation of anybody that is has achieved that state, is my reminder that I've been there before, I can get there again. And the way you get there is you have to let those snakes go. You've got to stop the dance. You've got to be brave enough to stop judging and labeling and thinking and fretting and questioning, and become completely and utterly still. The gold sun is a symbolic representation of the spiritual sun, or the Tao, the center of the Tao. Everything is the Tao, but the point at which the positives and negatives reconcile to equal a 0 point would represent the spiritual sun. And I won't go any deeper into it than that, but if you want to learn more about that reconciliation, I'd recommend looking into the works of Walter Russell, because he does a great job of expressing how what most people would call God, or the zero force in quantum physics, expresses itself as something tangible that produces time and existence. So with that statement at hand, then the meditation practice is really quite simple. Whenever we meditate, as you know, there's a tendency for the mind to, outgas itself like a dog forever chasing cars. But the action of the dog running, that would represent yang. Running would be yang, slowing down or stopping would be yin. The gas pedal in your car is yang, the brake pedal is yin. Sitting in a car that's moving nowhere would be neutralizing the polarities with regard to gas pedal and brake, which would be what I'm saying is the ultimate state of meditation. No gas, no brake, no destination, no bills. So when we're emotionally wound, the snakes that move up through the 7 chakras, which are the psychophysical energies, get entangled, and the chakra system says, well, if you're entangled over safety and security issues, you're going to have a ball of snakes down here. And we know as therapists that changes muscle tone, digestive function, eliminative function, and almost every function there is in the body. So the body constantly mirrors back your snake dance to you, so you have a palpable living experience of it. So the first method is when you're in a meditative state and you just relax. And as I've talked about in other blogs, you have to warm into these things because the body needs to be calmed down as well. But once you're in there and I'm just relaxing, if something rises up like, why did that person do that, or whatever it might be, then I see those snakes just like fire dancing. And then I do what I talked about in one of my previous blogs, which is climb up to the lifeguard tower, get above it all. In alchemy, that would be called a solutio experiment, solution, to come into solution, or a sublimation experience where you become higher than the challenge. Sometimes we have to rise above our polarities, and what you'll find is that the ego is like a dog that gets its teeth into something and won't let go, and it doesn't even want to know the other side of the story. It doesn't want to ask itself questions like, well, my friend was really upset today and was very, painful with his or her words. But if we're too invested in reacting to the pain and making the other person wrong, we don't ask ourselves the question, well, is that normal behavior for them? No. Maybe they were having a really stressful day, and instead of me reacting to their words, If I was more present, I could have said, it seems like something's really giving you a lot of stress today. Is there anything you'd like to share with me? But instead, the ego's too busy defending itself. So when we become present with the dance of the snakes and we climb up to the lifeguard tower, which takes spiritual courage, because you have to be open to accepting that your behavior either ignited the situation or kept it going, or it's your judgment or your unwillingness to let go of the pain of something mom did to you or dad did to you or something from the past. So I just go up to the lifeguard tower and I try to connect to my soul, and when I don't trust my ego's judgment, then I just ask my soul to guide me through inner voice, inner vision, or the sense of feeling. And I just detach my energy from the snakes or the situation. And what you'll find is when you let go of having to be right or even being wrong, but you're just open to seeing what's really manifesting before you. You know, sometimes I call it the big picture view. I often describe to my students, you know, if you turn the news on at night, the world looks all fucked up. People are getting raped and murdered and killed, and they're starving to death, and the list just goes on. But we forget that there's a lot of transformative process in the production of anything beautiful. Look at the moon. It's had the hell beat out of it. But it is this beautiful reflective surface in the sky that regulates so many things on Earth that we couldn't be here without it. But it took a hell of a beating to become what it is. Mother Earth was beaten with asteroids and fire and rain and chemical gases, and she's seen far more than we can throw at her. So I often say to my students, look at a picture of the Earth taken from outer space, from one of NASA's telescopes, and I show them a picture in my slideshows, and I say, when you look at that, do you see anybody being beaten up, raped, tortured? Do you see any wars going on? Or do you see the most amazing, beautiful blue pearl floating in the emptiness and the vastness of the galaxy, which is in the emptiness and the vastness of the universe? And everyone agrees it is beautiful and it is awesome. And you don't see all the problems because we've changed our perspective. We've changed our context of looking at things. So the same way when you get back from the Earth, you see the beauty emerge from what can seem ugly down on the streets of Miami or New York or wherever you're at. When we go to the lifeguard tower, we get back and we change our perspective, and we become brave enough to just see what's unfolding and look at the connections. And one of the connections that you see, if you hold the thought everybody's loving the best that they can, is that each of us is kind of like a child unfolding in different states. And just because we wear adult bodies does not mean that we're adult with regard to our psychic development or our spiritual development or psychological, if you want a more commonly traded word. And that we often still have all these pains and entanglements in us, and they've become entrained into our nervous system as behaviors. A great program is Get Your Shift, S-H-I-F-T, together by Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza. And Joe Dispenza says in the program, based on scientific fact, that once an emotional charge occurs, the chemicals dissipate in somewhere between 5 and 20 seconds. So he says if a person maintains an emotional state longer than about 20 seconds, you know that it's a conditioned habit, because if it was left to the body alone without the ego driving it, the emotional state would dissipate in about 20 seconds. So when you understand these things, it helps hold a mirror to yourself so you can say, wow, it's not 20 seconds, it's been 20 years and I'm still pissed off. So maybe there's a need for me to climb up to the lifeguard tower and disengage from energizing the snakes. And the funny thing about those two snakes is that they love each other, and that's what a lot of people forget. The feminine loves the masculine because she wants to fulfill herself. She's more empty inside and needs that sense of fullness that creates wholeness and connection. And he's got something he wants to give to her emptiness. And they're equally intelligent, but they have a slightly different view on things, so they tend to argue even when they love each other. So when we understand that that's the nature of these two energies, and without that attractor factor, nothing would move. We wouldn't breathe, we'd have no heartbeat. So by looking at the painting, and it's just a reminder to myself that I can't expect somebody else to separate those snakes. It's a legitimate spiritual discipline, and it takes real practice and commitment. And there's no need to read a pile of books or go to churches or whatever, because the practice is with you everywhere you go. And it can be as simple as finding yourself driving down the road and maybe seeing an obese person and hearing yourself in your head judge them, oh, what a fat person, or whatever you might say. But then you say, oh, look, there's those snakes. I'm biting again. And right then I see that dog biting, and I say, isn't it sad that that person probably really is in a lot of pain every time they look at themselves in the mirror or try to get on and off of a toilet, or wish they could have sex but haven't been able to have normal sex? What a terrible challenge it must be. And I have empathy for the fact that I know how many of these people, because I've had many obese patients, how hard they really do try and really do want to get better, but they've gotten such bad information. So the point is, once you start stepping back from the picture, instead of just looking at an overweight person or an unattractive person, you now see a person who's probably scared and in a lot of pain. And when you give that person empathy, the snakes inside of yourself calm down. It's as though you've been brave enough to look at the other side of your own judgment. Flip the coin, as I call it. So the practice, because it's so deep and it requires a perpetual commitment, it's very, very good to start with simple things like seeing yourself judging somebody, or someone cut you off in traffic, and the next thing you know, your urge is to give them the finger. Start with the little things. And I'm not bullshitting you. This is not an easy practice. We are a bundle. The ego is a bundle of ideas and concepts that become highly, highly entangled and conditioned. And as I talked about in my blog on meditation, we have emotional triggers that are related to complexes, which produce artificial intelligence, which until you grow spiritually, you run the risk of believing your artificial intelligence and acting on it, only to create a lot of pain in relationships with others. And my system teaches I, we, all. So the first relationship we have to master is the relationship we have with ourselves, which paradoxically, until one unifies the soul and the ego, is a relationship of two. I am upset because I am hungry. I this, I that. That means that there's somebody that's wanting something or that's upset, but it's perceived to be other than the individual speaking. There is a split there. One speaks to themselves in relationship. Until we get that relationship right, it's very hard to settle those snakes down, because, just like people often get dogs and cats and pets and don't do a very good job of taking care of them, we don't take very good care oftentimes of the animal elements of ourselves that we call a body, and screw our biochemistry up and make it very, very hard for us to escape the snakes, because those snakes extend themselves all the way to every cell and every atom of your being. The atom is the product of those snakes. It's a polarized source of energy that moves slightly under the speed of light, without which there would be no existence itself. So the snakes are woven into us very deeply, which is why it takes a spiritual practice to climb that ladder and get above your body. But I'm just saying, you can't get above the body easily if you don't take care of the body, and it's as disrespectful to not love and care for your body as it is not to love and care for an animal, a plant, or nature itself. And to have a spiritual practice that beats your body up is really another form of snaking. So in essence, I'm going to close by saying we all have the ability to gap these things, and we do it every night. We go into deep dreamless sleep where there's a complete gap in the snakes, and interestingly enough, that's when we are getting the most anabolic healing. That's when our healing powers are the greatest because the mind is disengaged from creating things that are contradictory to the process of our own healing. Dreaming is a state in which we reconcile many of the unconscious elements of ourselves and shadow elements we've stuffed down. So the point I'm making is we go into this complete state of separating the snakes and living in the gap for periods each night, but we're doing it unconsciously. And we all know sleep is beautiful. I don't know of anyone that doesn't love a good sleep. So if we know that it's healing for us and that we have that ability innately in us, then it's simply a step forward to practice sleeping awake. And that's, Steiner used the term sleeping awake and taught that beginners should practice meditating by simply getting comfortable in a chair, taking a piece of silverware, putting a plate next to your arm so that if you did fall asleep, you'd drop the silverware on the plate, it would wake you up. And the practice is to learn to get between the sleeping and waking state, because in that state you're exposed to much more of the unconscious. The ego's filtration system is not nearly strong, and so images and feelings rise up in you. And if you maintain a state of being a willing witness to learn with the intention of loving yourself and others better, then the universe unfolds many mysteries to you in that state. So there's an example of becoming practiced at using something that's built into our psychology and our biology, but using it as an active tool where awareness and consciousness are being created, as opposed to just leaving it to the unconscious. The unconscious does not fix us because the unconscious is expressing itself through us. But when you get down under the surface of it, you begin to see that the unconscious is really it is the manifestation of unconditional love, and that the polarities actually don't carry a right or wrong in the unconscious. The right or wrong emerges at the level of the executor or the ego. So once we dip into the unconscious and realize that all of it's part of a beautiful collage that is infinitely and eternally perfect, then we can start to import more of those unconscious potentials. Many people speak of the negative elements of the unconscious, but we got to remember the unconscious is loaded with the potential for life and love and creativity and spontaneity and freedom. If that's the nature of the unconscious, which is so much more vast than the conscious, it couldn't even be mathematically calculated, then the practice of meditating and becoming able to sleep awake and separate the snakes truly becomes a legitimate spiritual practice that produces conscious awakening that helps us resolve our inner conflicts. And I will close by saying that, I've been through a lot in my life. I've had lots of things that are very, very painful happen, and I've done painful things in relationships out of anger and frustration. And at 53, I could tell you, if I had someone teaching me this stuff when I was a young man, I would have been a better athlete, I'd have been a better creator, I'd have been a better husband, better father, better thinker. The challenge is when you're that young, you're so focused on accomplishing, and you identify yourself so much as what you're doing, not who you really are, that it's very hard to grasp onto these things. I'm sharing this with those of you that I would call younger people, because it's important for me to let you know that we don't have to be in pain, and if we don't do a practice like this, then we really are highly likely to repeat the same painful experiences over and over in relationships all around us until it feels like the whole world is collapsing around us. And then it leads to anxiety and depression and, drugs that aren't really that helpful because they just bury the pain even further. So my encouragement for all of you is, anytime you can see the snakes and feel the snakes, know they're inside of you. They're the product of your own manifestation of the product of your own ego's judgment, and that you can take steps towards working with that. And I would encourage you to do that on a daily basis with things that are simple. If you get up and it's raining and you feel yourself irritated because it's raining, hey, that's an easy one. Just say, isn't it great that the plants are all getting a drink? Or, you know, just flip the coin and pause and ask yourself, what it would be like if I got my way every day and it was sunny and perfect every day? Well, everything would dry out and it'd be terrible. Then you'd be begging for rain, and then you'd look back and say, wasn't I silly? So start with the little things, work up to the bigger things, and like I said, it's a practice. And even though I practice, it isn't a walk in the park. This is not for people that want fast food spirituality. Doesn't want people that want anyone to fix them or make their world perfect, or it won't replace a mommy or a daddy complex or a victim complex or a prostitute complex or a wounded child complex, but it will progressively give you a sense of connection to something that's beyond the strife and the challenges of the world. And for me, it has brought me into the roots of my own existence and left me feeling that I now, in my life, have the tools to take responsibility for what I'm creating and know that everything that goes down or bad has to come up, and everything that goes up can't stay up forever. And after a while, you realize the highs and the lows are really no worse or better. Lots of people make piles of money and kill themselves on drugs and do all sorts of stuff, or have everything they think they wanted, but they're empty inside. And I have coached more than I can count of those people. So after a while, we learn it's nice to smoothly sail down the river of life. And if we want to get excited, we can, but by practicing, we know that we're getting excited in a way that fosters love and connection as opposed to breaking it apart. So that's my little sharing on one of my personal meditation techniques. Hope you can practice it and enjoy it, and thanks for joining me today. See you soon. I'm Paul Chek.